the whole point, at least in the education that I got about the Holocaust, which was a big part of my Jewish education. I mean, I was going to the Hebrew school in the early 70s, and through the 70s, we were only 30 years out from the Holocaust. Many of my teachers were survivors. And this is, 40 years ago. More time has passed than had passed with the Holocaust. And the reason we were told, and I think that you would find this with any Holocaust education program or museum even, the reason we were told why we were studying this was because this can never happen again. And it wasn't 1939 that we were trying to prevent. We can't go back in time. It's something happening in the future. And we were taught, and I don't even think this was that particularly of a progressive, if you will, education. It was just simply, some type of moral education. This doesn't just apply to Jews. This is about humanity. These were crimes against humanity that took place. And when we say never again, never forget, never again, it's you prevent this from happening. You don't wait for it to happen again. So if you have people who are children in this case, but it doesn't matter, who are being concentrated in these camps, who are dying because we're prosecuting people who would leave water for them in the desert, or they're dying because we're not providing them proper medical care, or they are having their lives destroyed because they're being separated from their parents at a very young age. That's the time where you say never again and you intercede. You don't wait until whatever happens next, because that's what happens next. The whole point of it was to intercede before it gets to that point. And when they start putting up new barbed wire fence and new cages and whatnot, it seems to me that's when you speak out. And maybe we've gotten, maybe as a society, we have become more sensitized to this, to what's going on at the border because of Donald Trump. And that's good. But just because we weren't that sensitized before during Obama or during Bush 1 or whenever it was, doesn't mean that it's any less valid for us now to say, like, we as supposedly a humane country, supposedly, we can't do this, in a way that, like, it's one thing to sort of, and I'm not in any way apologizing, it's one thing to wage war and kill hundreds of thousands of people like we did in Iraq, because it's thousands of miles away and the American public can easily pretend like it's not happening. But this is in our country. I don't know. It really is stunning. And I agree with you. I think the Trump administration realizes, like, this may be a little bit more of a problem than we thought it was going to be. And on one hand, we want to sort of promote this as, sort of driving our people to the polls. But on the other hand, we may not want to promote it too much because it's going to drive other people to the polls.
Well, right. I mean, there is, the backlash is pretty, obvious. I mean, I remember when Trump went to England, actually not this last trip, but the trip before, and they interviewed a bunch of people in the streets that were protesting and various other, just man on the street interviews. And the Brits, this was what their concern was about Trump. I mean, it was the top thing. He's putting children in cages. I mean, there is it is more than the act itself. It's all the rhetoric that surrounds it, the demonization of immigrants, this kind of, speaking of them as animals and vermin and not human. I mean, we know what that is, the never again there, right? I mean, you can see the beginnings here. And when you hear that stuff and you see what they're doing and you see that they have absolutely no real concerns. I mean, look what happened. I mean, even Kirstjen Nielsen, who was an absolute enabler of all this stuff, actually a proponent of a lot of it. It became too much for her, and now they've got this guy, Ken Cuccinelli, in there, who is known as, he might as well be with VDare or one of these hardcore core, xenophobic groups that really want to, eliminate all immigrants from the United States. That's where they're going. I mean, it's becoming more and more extreme. And, you can't be, I know the proverbial frog in boiling water is not an accurate metaphor, but it's an apt one in the sense that these things don't happen all at once. They happen over time, and you see just ratcheting up and ratcheting up and ratcheting up. And that's why somebody like Ocasio-Cortez coming out there and just saying that word, saying this concentration camps, it kind of startles everybody. God, yep. That is what it is. And that's what's needed. That's what you need people to stand up and say, wait a minute, this is beyond. And it's not just us, lefties out here just kind of, ranting and raving. I mean, this is stuff that's happening on the front pages of the New York Times, and it is something that is absolutely Trump is willing probably to take the risk to do this stuff because he has to keep his base on board and has to keep them excited. And this is the way he sees, the path he sees to reelection. But the Democrats have got to, and other people, not just Democrats, decent human beings, have got to, be very clear on what's going on and stand up and follow the lead of someone like, Ocasio-Cortez in using the proper words and not being afraid to say it.